Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So the story I want to cover today has to do with a very famous, popular, important Carnaval group, what they call blocos, blocks in Brazil. So this bloco is called Ilê Aiyê. And anybody who has experience with Brazil's Northeast, particularly in a place like Salvador, the capital city, you're going to know about Ilê Aiyê. My first experiences in Salvador, Bahia, it was a lot of things that I learned. I'll never forget my first trip to Salvador, Bahia. I met some of the people from Ilê Aiyê. It was just an inspiring event. They were doing a show. I just saw like a couple of blocks long, just Black people dancing, partying, having a good time. It was like the atmosphere and the environment that I had been looking for while I was there. That first trip, I met a few good people, but different people that I met exposed me to different things. And I'm always grateful to this guy that I knew then when I met back on that first trip. His name was Marcus. And he took me to an Ilê Aiyê show one Saturday night, and I was just blown away. It was like, this is what I was looking for, cultura negra, Black culture. I'm looking for events that show off the Black population that, have elements of Black pride, the celebration of African culture. And that was all that I saw with Ilê Aiyê. They introduced me to some of the top people there. Next thing you know, I was actually on stage with one of the singers. It was an incredible experience. I will never forget that. I got that on some old 8mm videotapes that I got stored away. I have to post those one day. It's unbelievable. That's like 24 years ago, my first experience in Salvador Bahia. So anyway, I met one of the founders of the group. Everybody who knows who Ilê Aiyê, anybody who knows that group is going to know who Vovô is. Vovô in English means grandpa, but that's just, that's like his nickname. He is the founder, one of the founders of Ilê Aiyê that started back in 1974. This year they celebrated their 50th year of existence. Started in 1974, so 2024 and it's 50 years. And I wanted to do something about this a couple months back. And it was funny because I remember, and I started seeing articles about the 50th year of Ilê Aiyê, and it was either before or a little bit after the, stories were coming out talking about the celebration of 50 years of the television show Good Times. I'll never forget that. Like, wow, 1974 for both of them, right? So it was an incredible, it was intriguing. Like at the same time, I'm not saying they debuted at the same time, but both apparently came out in 1974. So anyway, Ilê Aiyê is just really important for the redemption of Black self-esteem in Brazil, because understand when Ilê Aiyê came out, being Black was not considered something that was a positive thing. People, you want to do everything not to avoid being considered Black. Okay. So Ilê Aiyê was one of the groups that started to turn this around, and it was in the middle of the military dictatorship. So you got to say it was a bold move to come out talking about Black pride in a Brazil that was trying to depress the feeling of being proud of being Black. So it's unbelievable. It's been a 24-year journey that I've been following this whole situation with Brazil. So recently, Vovô made this statement in an interview, and it caught my attention because this was like the second time in that week, last week, where a statement like this came out. Now, as we know, November in Brazil is considered the Black Consciousness Month. It's Black Consciousness Day is considered November 20th. The Black Consciousness Month is November. They even have a Black Consciousness Week, the week that contains the date of November 20th. So this is when there are Black-oriented events that are going on throughout the entire country. Okay. But what Vovô said, he was calling out something that he had been noticing. And he's saying that, look, the Black struggle is something that goes on every single day. You can't just, be into the Black cause and speaking about the need for Black equality just during November. You can't just be coming out certain times of the year. It's like Blackness is a struggle that we have all year round. So I was intrigued by what he said, so I wanted to just talk about this a little bit. So today's video, Vovô, the leader of the all-black Carnaval group Ilê Aiyê, calls out Black Brazilians that engage in racial cause only certain times of the year because we are Black all year round. So I want to talk a little bit about this. Let's get into this. Before I do, I always request, definitely like this video, share this video, consider subscribing to the channel, click on the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section. Let's talk about this. So let me present the material. I'm going to talk a little bit about Ilê Aiyê, and then there we go. So, Vovô criticized people who engage the racial cause only during festive times, is what the article says. I took the material from this that I'm using today was written by three people: Dara Medeiros, Magicin Euler, and Fabiana Lobo. So as I said, it's been 50 years of Ilê Aiyê in 2024. We have to understand the origins of Ilê Aiyê because Black people, and imagine Salvador Bahia is considered the Black cultural city of the country, right? But there was a time when Ilê Aiyê came out where Black people were, in all essence, for all intents and purposes, they were excluded from participating in Carnaval. Can you imagine that? Like, Brazil has always said, we don't have any type of segregation here. And I've always said, okay, you don't have any legalized segregation, but as much as I've studied about what goes on in terms of race in Brazil, I see all types of segregation. It's just not mandated by law. It is socially respected. And you see this from Bahia down to the south in places like Porto Alegre. You hear about it in Sao Paulo. We're not talking about now, we're talking about the origins of what people call a type of Brazilian apartheid. This is a term that they've used for a number of years. And when you pull the curtain back, you see it. It's just that you can't go there looking for whites and blacks only signs that you're going to see that. And we're not talking about now, even though even today, some people talk about a certain apartheid that exists in Brazil. I mean, I've talked about this before, and I will continue to expose this. So Ilê Aiyê was one of the first groups to speak out and saying, look, we need to have pride in Blackness. When they first came out, they actually wanted to call the group Ilê Aiyê, they wanted to call it Poder Negro, which means Black Power. Why didn't they do that? I'm going to talk about that in a little while. Ilê Aiyê brought the idea of honoring the beauty of Black women. So they came up with this event called the Night of the Black Beauty and the Ebony Goddess, right? Brazil's beauty contests have always just honored a beauty that's closer to the white phenotype. As I've said repeatedly, in 74 years of Brazil's history, there's only been 3 Black women who have won the Miss Brazil competition. So even in Bahia, there was a story I did some years back where the contestants, the Miss Brazil competition features a representative from each state. And so people were like outraged at the particular contest in Bahia. It was like, okay, this is a majority non-white state. You got a lot of Black and brown people in Bahia, but yet the women that were being presented were almost like 75% of them were either white or something off-white, or what you'll call Brazilian white, or just light-skinned mixed people look. And people were saying, this is absurd. You got all of these beautiful Black and brown people here, but yet even in a beauty contest where you say Brazil has some of the most beautiful people, you only choose the women who are closer to the white phenotype. Now, I think partly because of the commotion over that, a Black girl did end up winning that competition. But it was just a point that 75% of the women looked like they were just light-skinned mestizos, and some of them were either white or close to white, which is what the whole debate, the whole argument was about. Ilê Aiyê also wanted to promote the acceptance of dark skin. I remember some years ago, I never was able to prove this, but one of the most well-known singers from Bahia, in Salvador Bahia, is the current Minister of Culture in Brazil, Margarete Menezes. And I have never been able to substantiate this. I've read this. I don't know if it's something that's supposed to be considered true or it's just like gossip. But it was once said that Margarete Menezes was declined she was declined the opportunity to participate in Ilê Aiyê because her skin wasn't dark enough. Now, Margarete Menezes, she's clearly a Black woman, but this is what I'm saying. There's a multitude of different colors of Black skin. And to promote the dark skin look, this is what they were saying. It was like, Margarete, she's clearly Black, but she's just not dark skinned. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not sure if that's true or not. It's something that I've always heard. I don't know if somebody can actually tell me if that's actually true or if that was just a rumor. Anyway, let's get into this story. This is Vovô right here. So, in the year that Ilê Aiyê celebrates 50 years of existence, resistance, and many accomplishments, the Bloco's president, Antonio Carlos dos Santos Vovô, he's better known as Vovô do Ilê, criticized the lack of support from the Black community itself for racial initiatives. At a press conference at the Afro Punk 2024 event on the evening of Saturday, I'm assuming this is Saturday, November 9th at the Parque de Exposições de Salvador, meaning Salvador's exhibition park. Vovô called for people to be consistent. Now, in the video, I'm going to just do a translation and overdub of what he said. So this is what the Vovô had to say. We also have to make demands of Black people because they have to stop being complacent. We are Black all year round. Then comes the month of November, then the celebration of November 20th and the Ilê Aiyê Carnaval. Everybody wants to be Black. But Salvador is a Black city, and this has to be shown in the instances of power, he said. Another statement that he made, as long as we don't have this Black consciousness, it's going to be difficult. So as I said, the month of November is considered Black Consciousness Month throughout Brazil. It is now officially a nationally recognized holiday, whereas before it was just states and cities that were, participate in the events. The artist also commented on people who forgot about or who forget about the racial struggle when they manage to rise socially. This is something that I've seen in the Black world. People kind of see that people who climb the social ladder, are able to get to the top, become multimillionaires or whatever, and they tend to distance themselves from the Black struggle. But one thing that I definitely notice, if there's an accusation of people selling out, is the other side, where certain influential Black figures, they're like put on the payroll of those who want to present a certain topic or ideology to the Black population. They pay these people who have influence, and then they tell the people what their, I'll say, puppet masters are telling them to say. I saw this during the last election when, the Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris election, and it was just appalling to me. It just showed something to be true that I've seen for years, is that influential Black figures can be bought and paid for. This is where I say Black identity politics can become a problem, because if you identify with somebody or you follow somebody just because they're Black and they don't have your best interests at heart, they don't have the same ideology, they don't have the same responses that we believe would lead us to equality. They could be bought and paid for by a certain political entity, and then those Black influencers go public and they're supposed to influence the Black population to follow a certain political view. We saw this most recently in this election between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. I was done after I saw so many Black celebrities coming forward to entice the Black population to vote for Kamala Harris. I mean, regardless of who you voted for, my point was, it was sad to see that clearly a lot of these people were being bought and paid for. There were some in particular who had been bought and paid for a while. And it was just really sad to me to see that the people who have influential voices can be bought and paid for in that way. And it was pretty obvious to me. So anyway, what I'm seeing now is that this can also happen in Brazil, and it has been happening. Now, to what degree and to what people agree with in terms of political ideology, that's for people to decide. But that is the dangerous side of being connected to just Black identity politics, because what if you're following a Black person who may not have the best interests of the Black population at heart, but rather they're getting a paycheck to say what they say? So anyway, so Vovô is talking about those who forget about the racial struggle and only get into it at certain times of the year, particularly in Brazil during the Black Consciousness Month of November. Okay. He says,
que falta espaço. A negrada assumir e os negros também que ascendem socialmente.
What's lacking is space for Black people to take over and for Black people to stop thinking that they've become white. You can have a nice, cool car, you can live in a condominium, have a nice monthly income, but if you think you've become white, someone will remind you, and in a perverse way. I'm tired of seeing it, he concluded.
Você está com seu carro novo e a polícia parar você e perguntar: cadê o dono do carro? Documento. É muito duro. Então, enquanto não tiver essa consciência negra, vai ficar difícil.
Pretty strong words. We saw an instance, and in the last video that I did, it wasn't a case of I know that this girl thought she was white. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is that every now and then you're going to see something that happens publicly that'll let you know, like, well, these people don't consider you part of their group. You're the one who has been misled to believe, oh, well, I've arrived. I've got money. I got a nice car. I live in a nice neighborhood. I see these people being like me. And then you'll find out in the other ways that these people don't accept you as one of them. This is something that I see going on in Brazil all the time. You know, there's other stories that I could tell about that, but it happens everywhere. So anyway, let me talk about who is Ilê Aiyê. I presented a little bit before I got into this video today, but let's talk about it more. So what block is this? I want to know. It's the Black world we've come to show you. These verses by Paulinho Camafeu reflect the spirit of Ilê Aiyê, Brazil's first Afro block, or Bloco Afro as they call them, which recently celebrated its 50th year, created by Vovô, Macalé, e Apolonio. The most beautiful of the beautiful was born to show the world the strength and beauty of Black culture. Although associated with Carnaval, Ilê Aiyê's beginnings coincide with the important historical moment when the world witnessed the emergence and strengthening of various movements that fought for and encouraged the appreciation of Black culture, such as Black Power, the American Civil Rights Movement, and the independence of various African countries. This is a video taken from YouTube, how Ilê Aiyê brought Blackness back to Carnaval. Goes back to what I said at the beginning. It's unbelievable, but Black people were really kind of secluded into areas of service, you know, roles of service during Carnaval in Bahia. It's absurd. You got that many Black people in Bahia, and they're treated just like service. The help, if you will. Black men and women with colorful clothes, cabelos Black power, meaning afros, and their drums demanded space and made a revolution in Salvador's revelry. Always talk about the hair situation because it was considered unacceptable to walk around with your hair in your natural Black state. It's cabelo crespo, what we call kinky curly hair. Antonio Carlos dos Santos Vovô remembers the mission that was conceived and put into practice on November 1st, 1974 in the Liberdade neighborhood in Salvador, Bahia. The Bloco was created to redeem the self-esteem of Black people and tell their story from their own perspective. But it's not all just Carnaval. Ilê Aiyê has a social impact on the community, and with a pedagogical outreach project that includes the Mother My Hilda School, which teaches literacy up to 5th grade, Banda Ere, and vocational courses. The Bloco, whose colors are black, yellow, red, and white, had its first parades with a police escort. The early years were full of prejudice, according to Antonio Carlos dos Santos, known as Vovô. During the Carnaval period, Curuzu is the stage for the cultural religious act, the blessing for the Blocos coming out, which takes place with an orchestra of dozens of percussionists and a Black choir in celebration. You'll notice groups like Ilê Aiyê and Olodum have these large drum troops. It's like, you know, it's part of the block. Bloco da Liberdade, or the Afro block from the neighborhood of Liberdade, still has its roots in Caruzu. Its headquarters are now the Senzala do Bairro Preto, where dozens of educational inclusion activities are carried out, as well as maintaining the legacy of Ilê Aiyê. Okay, I said Bairro, Senzala do Bairro Preto, right? So this is the headquarters of Ilê Aiyê. It is also home to the My Hilda School with computer labs, classrooms, painting rooms, and industrial kitchen and other spaces. These are some of the women from one of the Night of the Black Beauty Ebony Goddess contests. I'll talk about that in a minute. 5 decades of art, beauty, and social struggle have inspired other blocos such as Olodum, Muzenza, and Araketu. However, there are still barriers to overcome. We're looking for sponsorship, partnership, sensitizing business people and politicians, says the Bloco's founder. Anyone who walks up the Curuzu slope with Ilê Aiyê needs to understand the importance the Bloco has for Black people, and why, for Vovô, the most remarkable moment in Ilé's history was putting the Bloco on the street for the first time. In its 50th year, the Bloco has had a documentary, concerts inside and outside the country, an exhibition, and on Friday the 1st, a concert was held to celebrate the trajectory of the Mais Belo dos Belos, meaning the most beautiful of the beautiful. So the rise and the creation of a group like Ilê Aiyê can be considered revolutionary, because definitely in the 1970s, you didn't have anybody who wanted to talk about Black pride and being proud of being Black in a country that promoted whiteness and embranquecimento, meaning whitening. Mix your kids, mix with lighter skinned, whiter people so that you can produce whiter kids. Ilê Aiyê said, no, we're going to promote Black consciousness and Black self-esteem and Black pride. That's why this group celebrating 50 years is considered a big deal. There's a number of articles I've talked about Ilê Aiyê. This was the 44 years back in 2018. If you go to blackbraziltoday.com, you'll just see numerous articles where I talk about Ilê Aiyê. This was the article celebrating 44 years of the re-Africanization of Brazilian Carnaval, combating structural racism through art, culture, and education. Okay. So if you ever go to Salvador Bahia, you definitely have to check out Ilê Aiyê, some of the amazing things they've done in the community. The Black Beauty, the night we are all ebony goddesses. In Bahia, the legendary Bloco Afro Ilê Aiyê crowns its 40th ebony goddess. So again, this is a very popular competition that, it wants to honor the beauty of the special beauty of women of African descent. So you'll have these women. Some of them participate in this contest every year. And eventually, I remember some years ago, there was one woman who had been in a competition like 5, 6, 7, 8 times. And she finally won the crown as the Ebony Goddess. These are just some pictures from the 2015 Night of the Ebony Goddess contest. So some of these are the contestants. I can see from looking at the pictures that if they did have some type of skin color, I don't know, criteria, these women are clearly all Black, but they're not, very dark skinned. As like I said, she was not dark enough to participate in Ilê Aiyê. I can't prove that. I can say that I see a spectrum of the Black phenotype among these women. I don't see any women who would be considered light skinned. You can see this woman might be considered light brown, but I don't see any light skinned women in the group. Okay. Now, somebody might argue and say, well, see, that proves there should be a difference between, these Black women who are darker color and those who are on the lighter spectrum. That's a whole nother discussion that I'm not going to get into right now. I'm just going to say that the darker spectrum of Blackness tends to be ignored. Okay. So through Ilê Aiyê and various like Black beauty contests that's going on in Brazil, they're just trying to honor, like, look, we're all Black. It might be lighter or browner skinned people or darker skinned people on the skin color spectrum. We're all Black. But whereas the lighter skinned people are held up as representatives of Black beauty, and that's definitely true. But what happens when you ignore the darker shades? So that's why you have something like Ilê Aiyê's Ebony Goddess contest. Okay, so these are just some more pictures this is from the 2014 Ebony Goddess competition. This is a yearly event that goes on. You have to be appreciative that Ilê Aiyê does something like this. Some of you may be familiar with Olodum. Anybody who's from Bahia will understand, who has visited Salvador Bahia will be familiar with this. Another cultural group that is connected to Black consciousness. Have the big drum choir chorus that go on. Ilê Aiyê is one of the more popular. Of course, everybody probably remembers Michael Jackson recording his "They Don't Really Care About Us" video with the drummers of Ilê Aiyê. You got Muzenza, another traditional Afro Bloco coming out of Bahia. All right. This is stuff to look for if you happen to be able to travel to Salvador Bahia, Araquetu. These are all, like I said, these are all groups you're going to hear about. These are some of the most popular blocos in Salvador Bahia's Carnaval. And then what I have to talk about is, at the time that Ilê Aiyê came out as a group or a block or Afro, they were advised, they were counseled not to use. They wanted to name the bloco Poder Negro. That's what I have highlighted here, and it was a clear allusion to the Black American, Afro-American Black Power. However, the founders of the Afro Bloc were counseled by people that work with the federal police to change the name because it could be identified as something being communist. And there was more. Let me see. What is this article talking about here? Okay, so read here. I'm gonna translate this. It says it was in a time that wasn't, it was not that distant ago. We're talking about the 70s and 80s. It was common in the Bahian capital of Salvador Bahia that for the exclusion of Black people who wanted to celebrate during Carnaval in the most famous blocos of Carnaval. It was only that a white multitude in the traditional Carnaval outfits were allowed to parade, while black men and Black women were kept in positions of service. This is an activity that dated back to the colonial period, but as popular singer Caetano Veloso from Bahia said, we need to pass through a second abolition because slavery and racial segregation in our territory, in reality, it never ended. So this is what I was talking about, how Brazil has its own form of racial segregation that you can look at. You're not going to look at it through sanction through the law, but socially accepted. It says black people are not allowed here. If I was to do a study on every state in Brazil, I would find this somewhere. Okay. This again, this is another one that talks about how they were talked out of. Don't call this group Poder Negro, meaning Black Power. Initially, their founders planned to name it Black Power. However, federal police from Bahia impeded the registration of the block with this name, alleging that it had negative connotations. Let me see. Besides this, at the time, the Bahian press supported, and let me see, they supported the prohibition, accusing the movement of the formation of this block of having, what is it, subversive intentions. And they said that they're trying to make the situation that's going on with Black Americans and make the comparison and say the same thing is going on with Brazil. And in some ways, it's true. Obviously, a lot of things that go on with Black Brazil is influenced by not only what comes out of the United States, but definitely in the 70s, the independence movements that were going on in Africa at the time. But the military dictatorship in the middle of the 70s, where it was still trying to promote Brazil as a racial democracy, and seeing a group like Ilê Aiyê coming out talking about promoting Black pride and Black power, they couldn't have it. So for that reason, they had to change their name to Ilê Aiyê. Anyway, want to know what you guys think about today's material. There's another article that I'm going to do probably really soon because somebody else made an allusion to the same thing that Vovô is saying. It's like people who want to be Black at a certain type of year, but then their personal choices don't seem to mirror the idea of Black power, Black consciousness. I'm going to talk about that in another video, but important to talk about this as November, Brazil's Black Consciousness Month, just ended. And it's intriguing that Vovô is saying something like this. He's not the only one. Anyway, wanted to know what you all thought about today's video. Definitely like this video, share this video, drop a comment in the comment section. Consider subscribing to this channel. Click on that notification bell so that you know when I put up another video. With that said, I'm going to end this video here and request that you all come back. Check out the next video that I post here at Black Brazil Today.